My name is David Van Zandt. I'm the president here at the New School, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this extraordinary event tonight. I want to start out by thanking all of our speakers, but most importantly, all of you for coming and making this conference so lively and effective. Finally, I really do need to thank Arian Mack. I mean, those of you who know Arian know of her irrepressible energy, constantly moving, and she's a spark that sort of kicked all of this off, which I think is tremendous. We also need to thank our co-sponsors, the Center for Public Scholarship, the Vera List Center for Art and Politics, the Pan American Center, the India-China Institute, and we've also been generously supported by Agnes Gunn, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, Larry Warsh, the Ford Foundation, and Artiste. Art and politics is really at the heart of the New School. The New School was founded in 1919 by a couple of faculty members from that university up to the north. And it was founded because the president, President Butler at the time of Columbia, was demanding that faculty take a loyalty oath. Okay? And from that move, here in the 1920s, there was a blossoming of both political discussion as well as artistic work and discussion going on all the time within the halls of the New School. Then in 1933, the New School opened its arms and welcomed a number of German Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Europe. They were social scientists. They came here and became known as the University in Exile. Once again, dissidents talking in an open dialogue about the world. That continues, I think, to this very day in any number of our different programs around. Just one example is our Masters of Fine Arts in Fashion and Society, where art and politics are brought together very often in the work of the students in that course. All of this ties back to the New School's basic principles. We were founded on the ideas of creativity and innovation, as well as social engagement. Another way to say that is art in politics. It's somewhat serendipitous, but tonight, at this very same time, we also have another very similar event going on at our University Center over on Fifth Avenue and 14th Street. There, Laura Poitras, who is a New School alum and the Academy Award-winning director, right, of Citizen4, is there with Glenn Greenwald from The Guardian, and just like Weiwei, Edward Snowden will be appearing via Skype over there as well. This is, how could you lose? Either place you go. And that is a part of a series that we co-host with the New York Times. Somebody heard what my evening was going to be like, and they said, wow, 2 international dissident artists in 2 signature venues in the same night. How very New School. Well, I think it's really no coincidence at all. I think it's the history, it's the foundation, and it's the future of the New School to be engaged in events like this. I hope you enjoy tonight's and learn from tonight's presentation and hearing from Weiwei. I don't know if he can hear me, but hello and welcome. And now let me turn it over to Arian Mack to introduce our panelists and Weiwei.
Thank you, David. Boy, there's a very big height difference. Thank you, David. And if Weiwei is listening, and I very much hope he is, because this is being live streamed, and the person who's responsible for this, getting us this video, is shaking his head, so maybe we know that he is. Anyway, there is no way to thank him enough for being part of this event. And the only thing I can wish for him and for the world is that we can have an event in another year and he can be here. Because right now he can't be here. There's another way he's also here, not only on the video you're going to see, but he's here too in the lobby of the auditorium, outside the auditorium. He created for his Alcatraz exhibit a series of postcards, very beautiful postcards. And he created a booklet to go along with these many different beautiful postcards. They're postcards of flowers. They're very lovely, beautiful images. And each of the different postcards are associated with a dissident, not necessarily an artist, but a dissonant human rights person who has been endangered, imprisoned, and tormented in many other ways. And Weiwei at his exhibit in Alcatraz invited the visitors to the exhibit to write a postcard, to choose one of the, or more, one of these endangered activists, and to say something to them so that they would know that while their names might be not well known and not well known as his name, that they are not alone, that we do think about it and we do care about what's happening to them. And we also have created, in the spirit of the Weiwei campaign, our own postcards, which is an image of Weiwei holding our Fear of Art poster. And we, with the help of Index on Censorship and Amnesty and Scholar Rescue, Scholars at Risk, have collected names of endangered, imprisoned artists around the world, and we invite you also to participate in that campaign, to let those people know that we are for them, and we would do everything we can to help them gain the liberty that all of us are entitled to. And I quoted early this morning a line from Picasso, and also when I was thinking about having to say something tonight, it also brought me back to Milton's Areopagitica, which is a plea for the right to disrespect, that we all have an obligation and a right to disrespect. And if you think of that in terms of what happened in Paris very recently, it's rather potent. And I also just read you a quote, a very brief quote from Picasso, who said, "Yes, art is dangerous. Where it is chaste, it is not art." And those also are moving words in light of what's happening in the world, and the fact that whether it's in the United States or in China or in Africa or in Bahrain, artists are imprisoned, they're tortured, they're disappeared, they're murdered, and their art is banned. And that's the heart of this conference, and I am very grateful for all the people who have spoken thus far and made this conference far better than I could ever have hoped for. So it's now my pleasure to say a few words of introduction to people who are going to speak after the video. And I assume nobody needs me to say anything about Ai Weiwei. You all know who they are. But I would like to say quickly a little bit about the person mainly responsible, totally responsible for bringing us this video, and that's Ethan Cohn, who's here tonight and who will be on the panel. He co-produced the film with video, the video with Ai Weiwei. He went to Beijing, made sure it happened. It happened. He brought the video back, which you're going to see. Ethan has founded the Ethan Cohen Gallery in 1987 as Art Wave's Ethan Cohen in Soho, New York City, the first gallery to present Chinese avant-garde of the 1980s in the United States. He introduced the work of now celebrated artists such as Ai Weiwei. And so we are deeply indebted to him. I also want to, because I don't want to get up again and interrupt the flow of the evening, I need to introduce Jerome Cohn, Professor Cohn, who is the moderator of the session, after the discussion after the video. Jerome Cohn is a world-renowned expert on East Asian law. He is Jeremiah Smith Professor and Associate Dean and Director of the East Asian Legal Studies. He was at Harvard Law School, and now he is co-director of the U.S. Asia Law Institute and NYU Law School, and co-author with his wife, Joan Cohn, who also happened to be the parents of Ethan Cohn, of China Today. Anyway, we're thrilled, we're grateful, and now we get the great privilege of watching this video. So, okay.
Hello, my name is Weiwei. I'm very happy I can be on the 32nd Social Research Conference. As a Chinese artist, I live in Beijing, and my condition has been constantly interrupted or disturbed by political pressure. So my practice of art has been under surveillance, and all the contacts or phone number or emails all has been under secret police's watch. And currently I don't have rights to travel. I don't have my passport. And also till now I don't have a chance to have my show in Beijing. Also, my name cannot appear on social media like Chinese internet. Also, nobody on the paper or magazine can discuss my art or even to criticize me. So I'm a person like not exist in this society.
Is your art censored in China because of your political position or because of the nature of the art itself?
I think my art is censored because my political position, also because my artworks, which have a very different attitude or understanding of the nature of art. So my art has been involved with social practice and also trying to bring up the kind of consciousness of the society in relate to social justice and fairness. But of course, it's not only about that. It's about individuality, it's about personal freedom, and it's about freedom of expression. And all those qualities are being considered as a political attitude or political principles, which in this kind of society, I would call totalitarian society, which is scared of or not allowed to have this kind of practice. This doesn't start with me. If we look at the history of China, before 1949, before the government got into power, they started already to have a very strong opinion on art. In the 1942, in Yan'an, which is a communist, before they take over the power, they already had a very clear principles about what art should be and what is not allowed in the art practice. And that principle, even today, still apply to Chinese literature and art society. So every work of, in principle, in China has to be part of the communist struggle. So that means has to under the precise measurement or censorship of the party. And it have to work for the party. Well, normally they say work for the people, but of course the people has no rights to vote. So the people's rights are represented by the party. So it's that means every work is censored. And the communists had a very clear idea. They said we gain the power by the gun, by the arms, and we maintain our stability by our pen. That means writing and art and self. So the expression and the media always being censored or controlled. They understand only by doing that they can maintain the kind of stability of the society.
When did the government begin to really attack you, clamp down on your art practice, give you a hard time? When was that sort of key moment, and why?
So my experience with the government, with this kind of censorship or very harsh treatment, long before my practice. My father was a poet. He was exiled for 20 years without a possibility to write words. And after I come back from the United States, I don't even want to practice art because of censorship. However, I have been make underground books. We call it gray cover books or white cover books, and trying to promote underground culture because there's no other space to discuss contemporary. And till 2000, we made a show in Shanghai because I think it will be safer because I live in Beijing and Shanghai has less experience on contemporary art. The show is called Fuck Off. The show has been shut down after a few days of the opening. But only till 2005, I got on internet. I have been, I feel extremely lucky. I was the first, a few artists, if not the only one, got very involved with internet. And by year 2008, there's earthquake and there's Olympics. So I become very active on internet both in my artworks, which in relating research for the death toll of a Sichuan earthquake. And that brought me to a very crucial confrontations with the police. And of course, the state doesn't want those information to be revealed. And as artists, we think the very essential facts or truths is the base of our expression. And as artists, I think I can find a form to really extend that belief. So by working on the internet and to motivate the kind of volunteers, and we went to Sichuan earthquake area, do research and documentary films, and we found about over 5,000 students who is dead in the earthquake. So that is the first moment I've been on the front line in confronting the state lie. Every day I would post the names we found the same day on my Sina blog, and hundreds of thousand people would watch my act, and also they will repost my findings of those students. So that made the authority made the decision have to shut off my blog. And during one testimony in the court, before the court, which is my lawyer also was a lawyer of a human rights activist, Tan Zuoren. So he was defends Tan Zuoren in a court in Sichuan. He said, Weiwei, can you come to help to become like a court witness to support this person? So we went to Sichuan, and that night police broke into the hotel and beat me. So that incident caused my head have a hemorrhage, and I had an operation in Munich 2009 in the autumn, and without that surgery, I'm not going to be here. So I already dead because it was very very bad brain damage that time, and that even put me in much stronger confrontation and argument.
Don't you think in the future that there are going to be many Ai Weiweis as the society becomes more educated? How can they repress you, Ai Weiwei? How can they repress the hundreds of thousands of educated Chinese scholars, business people, lawyers, educated medical doctors, people? This is, as you say, a civil society. Chinese have been studying abroad and they're coming back to this society. Don't they want the same sort of freedom of expression that they've experienced elsewhere?
Of course, today with the globalization and the internet, and with very broad communication between China and the West, the kind of control they're trying to make is extremely difficult. Every year, there's 500,000 students study abroad in the United States and Europe. They bring back, besides the knowledge, and they bring back the understanding of modern society, culture, and art. And all of them know me. I would every day walk on street or shopping mall or in restaurant, the young people would come to ask me to take a photo or shake hands or to say how much they understand my condition. Then you see, on one hand, the state put extreme control, but on the other hand, there is notion of freedom which is stronger than ever. And I think this kind of demand for social justice and the demand for the individual freedom, which is going to be stronger.
Your solo exhibition that's been traveling the world, your piece of rebar, the installation of the piece of rebar that were totally screwed up in the earthquake, you made them perfect again. Do you think the Chinese government understands the meaning of your art? But the people in the West understand. And it's very poetic, but at the same time it's damaging this, maybe the soft power, their prestige, or showing there's corruption, showing the Chinese are trying to push it, the government is trying to push it under the rug. Your work is bringing to light what's really happening. So doesn't the government understand this?
I think this government doesn't understand art. They only understand a kind of propaganda type, which a kind of art forms carries very purified or single message. So what they are afraid is art have different levels of meaning, or even unclear or undescribable conditions, which they would consider could be dangerous. So if something could be dangerous, considered can be threatened to the society, then the censorship exists. So the censorship not only exists in the principle of state or authority, because all the institutions, by rule, they have to submit their artworks before the show to the authority. So even that law is not very precisely applied, but every institution understand this can really become threatened to their existence, because authority can always step in to say you have to shut off the show. They will never give you a clear reason. They would only say this piece cannot show, or they would say, in the earlier time, they would only say because some other reasons like fire code or even just unplug the electricity. But today, they're much less harsh, but there is culture police. Also, there are institutions who play with that kind of game. So they would delete the names or taking off paintings or hide the message through their announcement, and trying to survive that way. That is very common in China, almost in every art show.
Can you give us a few concrete examples that you're describing?
Okay.
Because I think personally experienced recently you've encountered some problems.
In past few months, 2 examples. One example is I was included in a show in Shanghai, which is a museum called it's the biggest Shanghai contemporary art museum owned by Shanghai government, and the show is about only 6 contemporary art award. So the show is to show that art award in past 10 or 15 years, select hundreds younger artists to be awarded, and as a contemporary art, a best contemporary artist. I happened as jury in the first 3 award annual selections. So in that show, about the history, so they have to use my name because I was there and I was the original member of selecting those artists. 20 minutes before the show, the police come, ask the museum to take off my name, from the wall, because before a show all the names are printed on the wall. So they almost has no time to do it. So they have to reprint the whole wallpaper and use hair dryer to dry the wall, because in 20 minutes all the people will come in. So during the opening, Wooly Sikh is very angry. He has to give a keynote speak, and he stand up to say this is something which is not acceptable. Of course, he speaks perfect English. The translator doesn't even translate that sentence. Later he found out. My work is being taken out, my name has been deleted, and there's about 30-40 so-called best Chinese artists. They all know me. They all I select most of them as the best artist, but none of them, not even one artist, raised the question to say, hey, this is a historical fact. Can we respect that? So there's no question ever being asked, and all artists seems nothing ever happened. About 1 or 2 months later, Yulin Center in Beijing, Phil Tenari is the art director. They're putting up a show to memorize my colleague from China Art Archives and Warehouse, Hans van Dyck. He's my colleague and the earlier foreign Westerner who promote contemporary art, but he passed away. So the show is dedicated to him and to our early practice. So China Art Archives and Warehouse is a foundation I and Hans van Dyck and Frank, 3 of us, made us first Chinese contemporary art galleries, one of them. So we did many things, and we promote a lot of young artists in the 90s. So I didn't even get the invitation for that show. And when I realized somebody showed the invitation with all the artists' name in the invitation, but my name is not in there. You know, my name started with A, which always appear at beginning. So their name list start from a C. I was very surprised. I was not surprised about censorship, but I was surprised about this kind of self-censorship. They can easily say this is part of the history, and we're not talking about Ai Weiwei at all, but we have to mention the historical fact. And also they didn't mention the facts. Hans van Dyck had this institution with me, but they said with someone. So I become someone. So I said, okay, then I have to take off my work from the show. That is a very strong case of self-censorship. Later, I asked the police. I said, why my name cannot appear on this show? The police said, you know, Weiwei, we will never censor a foreign institution like that. It's themselves. You should sue them. So that's a very solid answer from the secret police even.
Tell us why the government is preventing you from leaving China. Why aren't they giving you your passport? What's the story? What's happening?
I was arrested 2011. Not for too long, it's just 81 days, but I completely disappeared. Not my mom, not my lawyer, not the whole society know where I am. I was being put in a secret location. And even myself doesn't know where I am because I was being put on a black hood and driving into nowhere in a location where I was 24 hours under military police present. Even during my sleep, there's 2 police standing next, right in front of my bed. Even when I was taking a shower, they have to stand so close, their dress has to be wet, their uniforms. After my release, of course, my passport has been taken. And every time they promise me they will return it without any trace, I never get my passport. But still, they still promise me they will give back to me, and soon. So I don't know when. And it's been 4 years. And yeah, but I think that is okay. I have much less freedom, but still I can work, and still my condition give me myself a very unique position and pressure, and make my fight or my argument or my expression, which has very solid, reality. I cannot make it by myself. It takes a powerful state to do it. So I kind of amused by the condition. All I have to ask is why me? Why not somebody else? I think because I've been through so much, like my father's generation. During the 1957 anti-rightist campaign, 550,000 intellectuals has been vanished. And of course, later Cultural Revolution and all those political movement, so many intellectuals has been crushed. There's almost no single one can avoid to have its own voice, not to be punished. So with that kind of background, also with my privilege has been United States, New York, for 12 years, for understanding how contemporary art or contemporary culture in relating to our contemporary life. So that gave me a strong influence or state of mind to become artist today in fighting for very essential rights, for fighting for freedom of expression. I never think that is just for me. I think that's for the condition of all artists and all human beings. This is the most precious right to be ourselves and to announce ourselves as an individual. And that is the best part of life. So I will never feel regret or feel sorry for the situation I've been.
Your art, though, following your detention and your experience, you say you grew up seeing your family persecuted because of your father's, quote, intellectual mishaps. How has your art personally changed since your detention, since those 81 days, not knowing you're going to be freed I remember you telling me that you weren't sure you would see your child again, your wife, your family, your friends. The whole world was worried about you. How has that affected your art? Has it changed your actual artistic practice?
After my release from my detention, I started to realize my voice has gained so much support, not only from China, but also from internationally. So many artists, institutions, and intellectuals, and ordinary people from New York, Europe, Hong Kong, and elsewhere has been supporting. So what they're supporting is about, that is freedom of speech. And in China, after Chinese government forcefully put a tax punishment on my company, within 10 days, there's 30,000 people donate over 9 million Chinese yuan to us in supporting us to make a fight, to bring them to the court. When I was in detention, I really feel, because they tell me I may be sentenced for over 13 or 15 years. The only thing I feel sorry is maybe I didn't give my son a chance to make him understand who I am. So when I come out, I always want to ask myself if my art or my works can tell my son or the younger generation who I am, what kind of life I have been through, and why freedom of speech are so precious.
The theme of this conference is the fear of art. Your project in Alcatraz that brought awareness, so much more awareness, to all those artists, intellectuals who are incarcerated, those governments holding those individuals, are they fearing your art practice?
I think all the authorities, why they're afraid of art? Because art can very sensitively make sense to everybody, can speak the truth so clearly, and can make complicated issue very simple and innocent, and that can be so powerful, that can destroy this kind of corrupted structure. So I think for being an artist, and we bear a responsibility to make those very essential principles attractive, sexy, and understandable. And I think that's why I still can call myself as artist.
We've just seen a remarkable interview, and I'm so glad to see so many people here to appreciate it. We haven't had the We speakers have not had the benefit of seeing everything that you've seen earlier in the day. And one of the questions we have, and maybe some of you after our introductory remarks will want to enlighten us, is where does China fit in? And to what extent is this wonderful Ai Weiwei representative? To what extent have Chinese artists been subject to fear, and in what periods? You've heard reference to several unhappy periods in the Chinese Communist Party's political history. So we have to take account of different times, different places, but also different artists, as Weiwei made clear. Many artists just have to play the game. So I'm eager to hear what our three speakers have to say, and then we'll have some opportunity for you in the audience to state your views. And I'm glad to see my wife, Joan Leibold Cohen, who's an expert in this field, also there, and we should have a good time. So the first, why don't you lead off, Minky?
Yes.
This is Minky Warden from Human Rights Watch, one of our most experienced human rights warriors, and with great knowledge of China and Hong Kong.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming tonight. We've got a big crowd, and I wanted to begin by asking how many of you in the crowd have been to China? How many of you have had the pleasure of visiting China? How many of you watched the Beijing 2008 Olympics on television? Pretty much everyone in the room. And many of you know that the opening ceremonies were in a stadium that was known as the Bird's Nest. A truly beautiful, groundbreaking, iconic building that came from the creativity of Ai Weiwei. He was one of the artists on that stadium. But in the end, he ended up distancing himself from this great work that the world saw as his work. And part of the reason is because of the 2008 Sichuan earthquake, which he referred to. The conditions in China at that time, at the time of the earthquake, it was a great tragedy and many thousands died. But Ai Weiwei researched and took down the names of children who died needlessly in what were known as the so-called tofu buildings, right? So these are Chinese officials who took a bribe to put up unreinforced concrete building for schools. And the piece of art that most speaks to me of his is the piece that is called,
For 7 years, she lived happily on this earth.
Yes. For 7 years, she lived happily on this earth. It's a piece that has backpacks of children. And it is really the Chinese government's responsibility in the event of a natural disaster, a catastrophe like that, to be the one who collects the names and the ages. The Chinese government should be bringing to justice the corrupt officials. And I think that it is an opportunity. Ai Weiwei, Ai Weiwei's work, I think, is so universal and speaks to us because it's a recognition that this is what the Chinese government should have done, should have collected the names, should have made reparations to the parents. Instead, the parents were silenced. People who tried to organize to bring this information to the public were arrested, beaten, and that's the title of this conference is The Fear of Art, but I think you can see there the fear of the government of information. And you can see there the fear of the parents and the fear of the children who died needlessly because of a government failure to rein in a corrupt system. So I think it is a great when China had the 2008 Olympics, the image that it projected to the world at that time was one of strength and power. The image that we should understand is that this is really fear. So the conference is titled The Fear of Art. Really, the Chinese government has fear of artists. And it's artists who are doing the work that government should do. It's artists who are literally on the front lines today, making information public, as Ai Weiwei says, in a compelling way that touches the heart. So as a human rights activist, I am pleased to be in the same company as Ai Weiwei. I think he is one of the one of the great innovators in human rights, and that's a good place to stop.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll next hear from Melissa Chan, who for many years played an outstanding role at the Asia Society in the presentation of contemporary and past Chinese art, and is now in Washington at the Hirshhorn Museum.
Thank you, Jerry. It's an honor to be here, to be talking about Ai Weiwei, but not just Ai Weiwei, but many other artists who have really helped us to understand some of the challenges of pushing the boundaries within society. Some of you might know that I was 14 years at Asia Society Museum here in New York, and during my tenure there, we presented a lot of Chinese contemporary art exhibitions when people really didn't even think there was a contemporary art scene in China. Right at the time when Ai Weiwei was arrested in 2011, we presented an exhibition that was a compilation of nearly 200 or so photographs that Ai Weiwei took while he lived for nearly a decade here in New York City, actually not far from here, in the Lower East Side. And many people prescribe his experiences in the Lower East Side, seeing a number of the protests there and seeing how people were able to respond to things that they disagreed with very publicly, as sowing the seeds of his idea of dissent when he took it with him back to China in 1993. We at the Hirshhorn Museum, and I've been there for 4 months now, but actually at the Hirshhorn Museum presented his survey exhibition, a major showing of some of the rebar works that Ethan mentioned in his interview, but really bringing together the development of his practice since the 80s through to today. And I think that one of the things of note about his work, just to set it into a context within the Chinese contemporary art scene, is that he was really always an agent provocateur, even from day one. So he was an artist who was involved in the very first kind of contemporary art movement in 1979 called Xingxing, or Stars. He was one of those artists who we often prescribe as being part of the birth of Chinese contemporary art, which was the unofficial or illegal exhibition of work on a fence, just very close to the National Museum of Art in Beijing. And so from this kind of birth of the Chinese contemporary art scene as we know it, he was there, he was a witness. And then when he returned to China after living here in New York, he brought with him many ideas. In fact, he inspired a whole younger generation of artists to create Beijing's East Village on the outskirts of Beijing. And this was a younger generation of artists who were engaged in performance art. And some of those artists were in fact arrested at the time and pursued by police for those acts. I think the biggest shift in Ai Weiwei's practice was really in 2008. So up until that point, he had been very much an agent provocateur, but his works were still within the realm of the art world. So he did do the Radical exhibition that was a satellite show for the Shanghai Biennale that he mentioned, that was called the Fuck Off Show, and many other things. And, you know, he created some very kind of compelling, visually arresting images, especially in photography, I think, of for example, a woman lifting her skirt at Tiananmen Gate, a highly contested site after June 4th, Tiananmen. So these were all his artworks that he created, but in 2008, after he withdrew from being part of the architectural team for the bird's nest for the Beijing Olympic Stadium, he began this project, which was to name the victims of the Sichuan earthquake. And I think this was a real tipping point in his work, where we saw Ai Weiwei not just his reputation grow internationally, because he was a figure right at the moment at which the world's attention was on China. So Beijing was crawling with international journalists looking for somebody who could speak to the unofficial version of what was really going on. And Ai Weiwei became that person, not just because of what he was saying, but also how he was saying it. He had been here in New York, he spoke English, so he could communicate with the BBC on their terms. So I think that what was interesting was that it was a kind of convergence of the timing, world attention, but also his adeptness at using social media. And so I think one of the questions out there is really, and it's kind of an art historical question, which is really this idea of Ai Weiwei as a social activist. Is his social activism, in fact, a conceptual art practice, or does it sit within more of a human rights practice? And maybe that's, as we think of contemporary art and the way that the distinct genres of painting, sculpture, video art or photography are blurring, we see more and more Ai Weiwei's social practice and art practice actually coming together. I did want to add one observation specifically about the video, and that what piqued my interest was actually his comments on censorship. Whenever I give a talk about Chinese contemporary art, the first question that people ask me is about censorship. And I think one of the interesting points Ai Weiwei made in his video was actually about the evolving nature of censorship within China. So when I first used to go and visit Chinese artists in the early 1990s, the censorship was very clear-cut. It was after June 4th, 89, the art scene went underground, and artists showed their work largely in private. So when we talk about the movement like apartment art, and that was all about artists retreating from the public sphere. They no longer had access to there were maybe 3 galleries to speak of all across China that were commercial galleries to show. But more importantly, the public museums were out of bounds. So artists only really either showed their work in their own studios or apartments, or they turned their attention to international opportunities. And that's one of the great kind of phenomena about the Chinese contemporary art scene, in that many Chinese artists got recognition for their work outside of their own country first, and then came back. So that was very clear in the 1990s as a phenomenon. Artists really knew what they could and couldn't do. And so what Ai Weiwei says about this idea of self-censorship, at the very time when, if you ask most contemporary artists in China, they would say, oh, I haven't encountered any censorship at all. Most would say that. So as the opportunities have expanded for most artists who live and work in China, you have another kind of perhaps more insidious phenomenon of self-censorship, of the kind of rewriting of art history. Right, when he says that his name can't be published, can't be shown. In a way, right at the time when Chinese contemporary art history is being written right now, kind of 40, 45 years on, you're also seeing another kind of political overlay. So I think that's an important thing to note, the evolution of this idea of censorship.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And now for a third perspective, we have Ethan Cohen, who's known Ai Weiwei since the middle 80s and who has worked with hundreds of Chinese artists in the last 35 years. And it was Ethan who did the interview with Ai Weiwei that we just saw.
Well, thank you very much for being here, having us here, and thank you to Ariane, to Jerry, and to Joan Liebold Cohen and I. This summer we had sat down to brainstorm ideas and questions for Weiwei, and had this dream that maybe we could get Weiwei here, or maybe we could at least interview him. And in fact, this became a reality, and you're here, and we're here. And in fact, I just was texted by Weiwei saying, I said to him that Melissa and Minky and Jerry and Joan and I and all of you were here, and Weiwei texted me back to say, I love you all, I miss you, and I actually, I asked him if there were any other things he wanted to add beyond his video interview that we conducted. I've known Weiwei really since, I think, 1986. And he's grown and we've grown, and he's a brilliant humanitarian who has guts, who, this idea of fear of art, he was sort of interested in the interview and the questions. And I think that what I learned from the interview was his complete commitment to freedom of expression and being true to himself. Truth, the essence of who he is. Art speaks the truth. And that was so impressionable on me. And he is not just a Chinese citizen, he's a human being who happens to be Chinese living in Beijing, and he believes in the rule of law, a civil society. And he has grown up since a child to see his family persecuted for ridiculous, trumped-up charges. And in fact, when I asked him the question of when did the government start giving you a hard time, it wasn't 2008. It was when he was a child. He lived in complete penury because his father was an intellectual, and his father's poem went a little to the right, a little to the left, and Mao didn't like it. So Mao exiled him to Xinjiang, and he lived in a dirt hut in the beginning of his life with his brothers and sisters. And so his life, he's not afraid. I mean, I think one of the questions was asking Weiwei when he was let out of jail after 81 days, how can you go on? Aren't you afraid of the government clamping down on you even more? And I think Weiwei has this, I think that 81 days has given him such power that he's not afraid of anyone or any institution. He wants to speak the truth. He believes, one of the most important things to remember, Weiwei is a Chinese citizen. He's a patriot. He believes in a civil society. He believes in the evolution of a proper society. He believes that the government has a legal system that represents him and every other Chinese citizen. If you do wrong, or someone has wronged you, you can go to the government, you can petition, and you can have your day in court. And it may not be perfect today. Jerry may want to elaborate, or Minky, or Melissa. But there is a system in China, and we hope slowly but surely China will move as they become more powerful in the world economy. They believe in soft power. They have to somehow open up, and that was one of the questions I posed to Weiwei. Aren't there hundreds of thousands of other Ai Weiweis out there? And is it a time bomb? And but I think that art speaks the truth, and Weiwei is one of those people. And I don't think he's the only Chinese artist dissident who has been censored. I think the Gao brothers, Wu Yuren, Gao Zhen, who is now in New York. However, it's interesting, Weiwei has the right to produce art in China freely now. He may not be able to leave to come to the Hirshhorn Museum to see an exhibition that he's included in, so he doesn't have his passport yet. We hope he will. Maybe the Chinese government will soften and give him a passport, but he doesn't want to just leave China. He wants to leave China with dignity. He wants to leave China and be able to come back to China because he lives in China. That's important. This is a picture of Ai Weiwei as a child with his father. Oh yeah, great. His father, Ai Qing, the famous poet, who actually, when he was 89 years old, I think, or 90 years old, was wheeled out into Tiananmen Square in 1989 because the father wanted to have solidarity with the children. Yeah. Sorry. Let me just show a few slides here. This is actually Ai Weiwei's wife, who's actually showing her underwear right in Tiananmen Square. This is from late 90s. Here's Ai Weiwei, a study of perspective. And what was exciting, before Melissa became the director of the Hirshhorn Museum, when you were still at the Asia Society, what was exciting was in the beginning of that exhibition, there was a photograph of this and in Washington. So I said to myself and to friends that the Chinese ambassador to the United States must have been very relieved to realize that Weiwei isn't just putting pressure on the Chinese government. This is a very important Weiwei performance piece that he did in, I guess, the mid-90s, 94. And the idea of you must break the past to create the new. This is very important. This is maybe Jerry can talk about this, but this is what Mao believed, the communists believed, that you must break the past to create the new. And he's actually literally doing that with this pot. People, conservative connoisseurs of antiquity are shocked that Weiwei would be destroying a piece of antiquity here. But actually, I said to Weiwei, after you did this performance, what do you do with the pot? He said, oh, I pieced it back together again. He loves antiquity. These are all Neolithic pots. Here's a Neolithic pot with Coca-Cola written on it. This is a wonderful picture of Weiwei in his studio, and this is, I think, one of his earlier, very powerful pieces where he's taken a Ming Dynasty table and he's taken a Qing or Ming Dynasty 2 or 3 ton beam and put it right into the table. And architecturally, it's beautiful. Visually, it's beautiful. And then he's sitting on one of his beautiful chairs that he's pieced together. One of Weiwei's installations. Here's images from the earthquake. And we were talking about the rebar. This is what the rebar actually looked like after the earthquake. It looks like an atomic bomb had hit it. And he took thousands of pieces of these rebars. This is actually in marble. This is actually in metal. And these are the pieces that he straightened perfectly, as though you never knew there had been an earthquake. And this is, you can see the earth tremble there, but also it's beautifully architecturally. I don't know, did you all get a chance to see this exhibition either at the Hirshhorn or at the Brooklyn Museum this past year? Here are backpacks after the earthquake that Weiwei's staff photographed, or Weiwei photographed. And this is the image that Minky was mentioning, where Weiwei had made out of backpacks. It was a actual sentence that one of the mothers of one of the children who passed, and the mother had said that for 7 years, she lived happily on this earth. And Weiwei's using these backpacks as though it was a communist propaganda posters in a major stadium. Here he's made backpacks in the shape of a snake. And here in the background, you see all these names. These are the 5,000 plus names that Weiwei was able to amass through a grassroots organization in the villages all through China, through Sichuan. And his team went by village to ask how many people had passed away and tried not to use his name, but they somehow very low-key tried to spread the word that they wanted to find out who passed away. And this was Weiwei's research. And so beautifully at the Hirshhorn Museum, there's you could hear there was a recording of people through the internet that Weiwei asked people to read out every name of every child who passed. And you can hear that. It was one of the beautiful. Here, Weiwei obviously uses internet, Twitter. You can follow him on Instagram. The importance in Weiwei. Weiwei didn't even know how to type, I think, before, in the 90s, he didn't know how to type. Here's Weiwei when he was actually stopped by the police or being observed. This is when Weiwei was woken up in the Tangzuren trial in 2009. Weiwei when he was in the hospital in Germany. And this is Weiwei when he was incarcerated. This is actual reenactment, or it's a sculpture installation that he created for the Venice Biennale, where he created, I think, 6 different situations where the soldiers were constantly around him while he was sleeping, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, walking, eating, sleeping. 24-hour surveillance. And today, Weiwei lives under complete surveillance. If you visit him in Beijing, you will be videotaped. The image on the right is actually a marble monitor that he's created as one of his sculptures. Every day since Weiwei has been out of jail and he hasn't had his passport, he has left flowers in front of his studio. In fact, it was a little bit after he was let out of prison, actually. Someone had donated a bicycle, and he decided that he would leave flowers in the basket. And every day somebody comes in his little village in Beijing and takes the flowers. And Weiwei is actually videotaping this 24/7. So while we were editing the videotape, we saw people sort of coming up, examining the flowers and say, should I enjoy the flowers? Anyway, so that's that. Thank you.
Good. In a way, there's a tension tonight between, on the one hand, talking about this fascinating, important, worldwide figure, and on the other hand, talking about lots of other Chinese artists. And to some extent, Weiwei's position now, through an uneasy compromise, is stabilized, whereas that of many other artists is not. It's not that Weiwei is fearless, he certainly is, but more than that, you've got to see him in action occasionally. He's just pugnacious. I've seen the videos of him literally invading the Chengdu police station that had harassed him, and I felt sorry for the police because he really goes out of his way to be tough. And about a year and a half ago, we had dinner in Beijing, and the secret police fellow who tails him was at a nearby table. And Weiwei and his lawyer, Pu Jichang, who's now in jail for a long time, they not only identified the fellow, but Weiwei and Pu would go over and they would photograph the secret police fellow while he was trying to slurp his soup. He's this unusual character. Now, he's been able to get away with it, certainly until 2011, because people thought he was well connected because of his father's career and Communist Party role. And I asked him at lunch, I think in 2010, who's up there protecting you? And he said, nobody, but the leadership is afraid to find out. And finally, he was so provocative, the leadership went after him. But then he just really demonstrated he not only has internal connections, but he has external connections, because a huge number of people protested his confinement in China. I think there are well over 100,000 people in the art world, mostly people who until then had pretty much goodwill toward China. And he demonstrated the kind of power that's also part of his protection. Just one other point, and I guess that's why I'm here. Weiwei's case, when he got confined, made legal history. His confinement was without any legal justification. And as a result, when the party revised the criminal procedure law the following year in 2012, they had to deal with this problem of locking somebody up for as long as 6 months with no real basis other than a policeman's decision to investigate somebody. So he's had a lot of impact, but we should also, of course, as we have here, keep in mind changes in policy. Since Xi Jinping has become the new leader, things have become tighter. And it's harder on artists as well as a lot of other people. Ethan mentioned an artist who might be here tonight, for all I know, Guo Jin, who last summer was treated to 15 days in very harsh police confinement because prior to the 25th anniversary of the June 4th, 1989 massacre, he had a performance art show in his apartment, not in the street, not in the gallery. And the police came in and broke it up and locked him up. Again, no court intervened, no lawyer was allowed to protect him. And artists may not be the most abused people. I think the Falun Gong is probably the most abused group, but they suffer, and a lot depends on their individual behavior. And Weiwei has been so blatantly provocative to the Communist Party in public, giving them the finger. I don't know anybody who's done that. I don't know any criminal suspect, anybody investigated by the police who's been so openly defiant. And we have to take that into account because he's not your average good artist. Do you have any other thing? You spoke so quickly.
Well, I did want to say, if you have a chance to see a film called Ai Weiwei, Never Sorry, it's a terrific documentary, and it opens with a scene of his cat opening a door. And I always think that's a perfect metaphor for Ai Weiwei himself, because he's opened doors to the situation in China for a lot of people who might not otherwise take a close interest. And as Jerry says, we're in a period of probably of escalating repression in the human rights area, probably the worst since the immediate post-1989 period. But we also are at a really interesting moment of hundreds of thousands of people jumping the Great Firewall to access information on the internet. We're at a moment when human rights activists, health rights activists, lawyers, and others are public interest lawyers are stepping forward to challenge the system and to demand their rights. So I would say that one of the great things that Ai Weiwei does is use humor, and you can't escape the joy in his work, even when he's dealing with very tough topics. So I think that doing this work and throwing a spotlight on human rights activists, using the power in his spotlight to showcase others who may not be known to the world but should be. And I would also say here that China's the only country that has an imprisoned Nobel Peace Prize activist at this point. I think we should remember that Liu Xiaobo and his wife, Liu Xiaobo is in a prison. His wife, Liu Xia, is under house arrest with terrible conditions mentally and physically. So I think it's useful to remember that artists broadly construed are suffering in China today, and perhaps Ai Weiwei's greatest life artwork will be to throw the world spotlight on their efforts and their suffering to build a better China.
The biggest problem in China now is lawlessness, low-level visibility harassment, trying to break people's will without even incurring the bad publicity of formally imposing criminal or other sanctions on them. There's an awful lot of just attempting to immobilize people through fear and through harassment that never reaches the level of public visibility. Well, I'd like to bring the audience in, and is there no time, or we have to quit at 7:30? Well, Joan, do you have any final remark you wanted to make? Do we have a mic down there?
Well, there are 3 points I'd like to make. One is, why are they so scared of art? Your whole program is, why does art scare people? And I know that the first one is that the Chinese are always terrified that there are secret messages in the art. For instance, they're very afraid of abstract art, and it's very much discouraged because they think, oh, what's in there? And so that's one part of their fear. Now, I wanted to elaborate on your very interesting conversation about the earthquake and the backpacks. The reason that the officials were so eager to suppress the names of the children who were killed with these very poorly built schools, officials had been allotted a certain amount of money to build schools, and the officials had apparently had a lot of parties and took the money and went to Las Vegas. And so the buildings were very poorly built. Then the earthquake came, and that's the reason that the children were all killed. So the officials felt if they could suppress the names of the children, they could pretend it never happened. They made it all just a blank slate. Well, Weiwei, of course, was very aggressive in finding out the names and then posting them. And at Melissa's Hirshhorn Museum, they were gorgeously on the wall. They were on the wall at the Brooklyn Museum, and for everybody to see, and also it was recorded so you could hear it. So those children will be remembered. And those poor families, in China, you're not allowed to have more than one child. And here they had given their only child to this corrupt cause. They're very afraid that students will be infected by Ai Weiwei. I was involved in a program at the Central Academy of Fine Arts, which is a very prestigious institution. And they said to me, well, you can invite anybody you want. And I said, well, that's fine. So I invited Ai Weiwei. Well, he had never been in that institution, and as a result, no students were allowed. It really, they're just terrified of him.
Well, I want to thank our speakers, Minky and Melissa and Ethan, and also thank Ethan for doing that very fine video.
Thank you. Maybe I'd like one thing I wanted to add that Weiwei would want to know, make sure all of you who are at this conference, you matter and you are important to him and you're important to the world. Just as Weiwei has very poetically been a spokesman for all those incarcerated individuals around the world who have been incarcerated because of their beliefs. I would encourage you, number one, visit Alcatraz. If you haven't seen that exhibition, at least visit it online, because it's beautiful, it's powerful. And I asked Weiwei, why did he use Lego to create all those portraits? And in fact, just the humor. Weiwei was playing with his son, and he said, oh, I can make all these things. And it just occurred to him, oh, maybe I'll make portraits. I'll make a rug of Lego. It's simple. It's not offensive. It's playful. But the reality is, when you enter Alcatraz in that huge bathhouse of, must be, 15,000 square feet of images of incarcerated individuals because of their beliefs, not only Weiwei has been, he informs you because you can say who these people are, they matter, you realize who they are and they exist, and then he has a project where you can go down and send those individuals a postcard. And having been incarcerated for 81 days, he knows how lonely it is. And he wants to put the pressure internationally on all those governments who are holding those individuals. Either if they're not going to give those postcards to those individuals, at least the world's going to put pressure on the governments to release those individuals. If the individuals receive the postcards, the individuals will know someone cares about them. And that's so important. And I think that is where an artist can really play a big role internationally, and it's significant.
Excuse me. I think we've run through our time. I want to thank our speakers, and we wish you a successful day tomorrow in your conference.